December 10th, 2025. A team of archaeologists at the British Museum announced a discovery that their lead researcher called, and I'm quoting directly, the most exciting finding of his 40-year career. In Suffolk, England, they found a hearth, a fire pit, burned clay, heat-shattered tools, and two small fragments of iron pyrite, a mineral that produces sparks when struck against flint. The fire had burned at over 700 degrees Celsius. It had been lit repeatedly in the same spot by the same group. The hearth is 400,000 years old, and it was not made by us. It was made by Neanderthals. With that single discovery, the oldest confirmed evidence of deliberate fire-making was pushed back by 350,000 years. 350,000 years. Everything we thought we knew about who invented fire and about the people who invented it just changed. Close your eyes and picture a Neanderthal. You probably pictured something hunched, heavy-browed, grunting, dragging a club, barely human. A stepping stone between ape and person, useful for explaining evolution, but not much else. That image was wrong when it was invented in the 19th century. It has been getting more wrong with every decade of research since. And in 2025, it collapsed completely. Because here is what the evidence now tells us about Neanderthals. They made fire deliberately 400,000 years ago. They buried their dead with flowers and tools. They made jewelry, musical instruments, and cave art. They cared for their sick and elderly. They interbred with our ancestors and left genetic material inside millions of living people right now. They were not a failed version of humanity. They were a different version of it. And the questions this video is going to answer are these. Who were Neanderthals really? Not the cartoon, but the actual animal. What did they do that we never gave them credit for? Why did they disappear? And what does the fire discovery in England in December 2025 change about everything we thought we understood? The Neanderthal was discovered in 1856, 3 years before Darwin published On the Origin of Species. A partial skeleton pulled from a limestone cave in the Neander Valley in Germany. Thick bones, a heavy brow ridge, a skull that looked nothing like a modern human's. Scientists had never seen anything like it. Their first instinct was to explain it away. Some argued it was a diseased modern human, a person with rickets and arthritis, whose bones had been deformed by illness. Others said it was a Cossack soldier who had crawled into the cave to die during Napoleon's campaigns. The idea that it might be a genuinely different kind of human, one that had lived and died before our species arrived in Europe, was almost too strange to accept. Eventually, the evidence accumulated to the point where denial was no longer possible. This was something else, something older, something that had walked Europe for hundreds of thousands of years before we got there. But the damage was already done. The image that formed in the public imagination, the brutish, dim-witted cave dweller, was set before the science had a chance to correct it. For most of the 20th century, Neanderthals were presented as evolutionary dead ends. Successful enough to survive for several 100,000 years, but ultimately outcompeted and replaced by the smarter, more adaptable Homo sapiens arriving from Africa. They were portrayed as passive, using naturally occurring fires, but unable to create their own, scavenging more than hunting, lacking the language and social complexity that made modern humans dominant. Every one of these assumptions has been overturned, some recently, some dramatically, and none more dramatically than in December of 2025. But before we get to the fire, we need to understand who Neanderthals actually were, because the species that made that hearth in Suffolk 400,000 years ago was not the dim-witted brute of popular imagination. It was something considerably more unsettling and considerably more familiar. Neanderthals. Homo neanderthalensis first appeared in Europe approximately 400,000 years ago and survived until roughly 40,000 years ago. That is 360,000 years of continuous existence on this planet. For context, our entire recorded human civilization, from the first cities to right now, covers approximately 10,000 years. Neanderthals were here for 36 times longer than everything we consider human history. They were not small. Adult males averaged around 5 feet 5 inches in height, similar to many modern human populations, but were significantly more robust. Broader shoulders, thicker bones, a barrel chest adapted for cold. Muscle attachment points on their skeletons suggest physical strength considerably beyond modern humans. Their brains were, on average, slightly larger than ours, not smaller, larger. This detail tends to surprise people. The Neanderthal brain was organized differently from ours, with proportionally larger regions dedicated to vision and body control, and different development in areas associated with social cognition. But it was not a smaller brain. It was not a simpler brain. They ranged across a vast territory, from the Atlantic coast of Portugal and Spain, through Central Europe, into the Middle East, and as far east as Siberia. They survived ice ages that periodically drove temperate ecosystems to near collapse. They hunted large Ice Age megafauna, mammoths, woolly rhinos, cave bears, prey that required coordination, planning, and tools sophisticated enough to actually work. The stone tool technology they developed, called Mousterian, included prepared core techniques requiring multiple precise steps planned in advance. This is not improvisation, this is manufacturing. And then there is the evidence of their inner lives. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, a Neanderthal burial site contained pollen from multiple flower species, evidence, some researchers argue, of flowers placed deliberately on the body. The interpretation remains debated, but what is not debated is that Neanderthals buried their dead at all. This behavior, treating the dead with deliberate ritual, was previously considered exclusively modern human. Eagle talons found at Neanderthal sites in Croatia, dated to over 130,000 years ago, show cut marks indicating they were deliberately removed for use as jewelry, 50,000 years before modern humans arrived in Europe. A flute carved from a cave bear bone found in Slovenia is attributed to Neanderthals and dated to over 60,000 years ago. They were making music. And cave art in Spain, red ochre drawings on cave walls, has been dated to over 65,000 years ago. Modern humans weren't in Europe yet. The art was already there. So who started the fire? That question, which sounds almost metaphorical, turns out to have a very specific, very recent, very shocking answer. And it comes from a field in Suffolk, England, where a team from the British Museum spent 4 years proving something that rewrites the beginning of human technology. The site is called East Farm, near the village of Barnham in Suffolk, eastern England. It has been known to archaeologists since the 1930s. Flint tools had been recovered there for decades. Hand axes, scrapers, tools from a period when what is now England was a forested landscape connected to continental Europe before the English Channel formed. In 2017, during a new phase of excavation, the team found something that stopped them cold. A patch of reddened, baked clay. Around it, Flint hand axes shattered by intense heat, the kind of fracture pattern that occurs when stone is exposed to fire rather than struck with tools. And 2 small fragments of iron pyrite. Iron pyrite, a mineral that produces sparks when struck sharply against flint. The crucial detail is this: iron pyrite does not occur naturally in the Barnum area. Someone brought it there, carried it from a source somewhere else, knowing what it was for, knowing it would be needed. This is not an animal accidentally encountering fire. This is an animal that understood fire, understood how to make it, where to find the materials, and how to transport those materials to where a fire was needed. The team spent 4 years ruling out every alternative explanation. Could the heat have come from a natural wildfire? Geochemical analysis said no. The temperatures exceeded 700 degrees Celsius in a concentrated, repeated pattern inconsistent with wildfire. The burning happened multiple times in the same spot. It was a hearth, used again and again. The study was published in the journal Nature on December 10, 2025. Its conclusion, stated plainly, is that Neanderthals were making fire 400,000 years ago. This pushes back the earliest confirmed evidence of deliberate firemaking by 350,000 years. Professor Nick Ashton from the British Museum, who led the excavation, described it as the most exciting discovery of his 40-year career. Dr. Sylvia Bello from the Natural History Museum contributed to the microscopic analysis of the pyrite fragments. Her assessment was direct. The Barnum Neanderthals were not passive users of naturally occurring fire, they were its inventors. Think about what firemaking actually requires. You need to know which materials produce sparks. You need to know which materials catch those sparks. You need to know how to build a structure that allows fire to grow rather than die immediately. You need to understand wind direction, fuel management, and how to sustain a fire once it's burning. None of this is instinct. All of it is knowledge, learned, remembered, and transmitted from one individual to another across generations. Researchers at the Natural History Museum noted that fire enabled new forms of social life. Evening gatherings around a hearth would have provided time for planning, storytelling, and strengthening group relationships. Behaviors associated with the development of language and more organized societies. 400,000 years ago, in what is now England, a group of Neanderthals sat around a fire they had made themselves. They may have cooked food, they may have told stories, they may have planned the next day's hunt. We don't know, we weren't there, but they were. The fire discovery is the most dramatic single finding of 2025. But it fits into a pattern that has been building for decades, a pattern that leads to one of the most personal questions in all of science. Because Neanderthals didn't just live alongside our ancestors, at some point they met them. And what happened next is written inside your body right now. Modern humans arrived in Europe approximately 45,000 years ago, moving out of Africa and the Middle East. Neanderthals had been in Europe for over 300,000 years at that point. The continent was theirs. They knew every valley, every river, every cave. For somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 years, both species were present in Europe simultaneously. They overlapped. They shared landscapes, competed for resources, and, the genetic evidence now confirms, occasionally had children together. In February 2025, a new study revealed that modern humans and Neanderthals interbred much later than previously thought, pushing the timeline of interbreeding forward by tens of thousands of years, meaning the contact between our two species was more sustained and more recent than the scientific community had assumed. The result of that contact is measurable. People of non-African descent today carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA. In some populations, particularly in East Asia, the proportion is higher. That DNA is not neutral. It is doing things. Neanderthal gene variants in modern humans have been linked to immune system function, the same pattern seen with Denisovan DNA, where interbreeding transferred locally adapted immune genes into incoming modern human populations. A Neanderthal gene variant involved in blood clotting has been associated with both protection against certain infections and increased risk of blood clots in modern carriers. Neanderthal DNA influences skin and hair characteristics in modern populations across Europe and Asia. And research published in 2024 identified Neanderthal gene variants associated with pain sensitivity. Modern humans carrying these variants have measurably different responses to pain stimuli than those who don't. The Neanderthals are gone, their genes are not. But here is what the interbreeding evidence also tells us about the relationship between two species. For thousands of years, in the forests and valleys of Ice Age Europe, modern humans and Neanderthals were close enough to have children together. Not once, not accidentally, repeatedly across multiple locations and multiple generations. These were not chance encounters between strangers, they were sustained interactions between communities. Communities different enough to be classified as separate species, similar enough to find each other recognizable. What those interactions looked like, whether they were peaceful or violent, whether they involved trade or conflict or simply coexistence, we don't know. The bones and the DNA can only tell us so much. What we know is that they happened, and that the children survived. So, if Neanderthals were this sophisticated, firemakers, artists, musicians, successful parents, why did they disappear? The answer is more complicated than the old story of modern humans simply outsmarting them, and considerably more uncomfortable. Neanderthals disappeared from the fossil record approximately 40,000 years ago, shortly after modern humans arrived in Europe in significant numbers. The timing is not coincidental, but the mechanism is more nuanced than simple replacement. The old model, modern humans arrived, Neanderthals couldn't compete, Neanderthals died out, has been largely abandoned. It doesn't fit the evidence. Neanderthals had survived dozens of previous climate fluctuations and ecological disruptions over 300,000 years. They were not fragile. What current research suggests is a combination of factors, none of which alone was sufficient. Climate change at the end of the Pleistocene disrupted the European ecosystems Neanderthals depended on. Their population was already thin. Estimates suggest total Neanderthal population at any given time may have been only in the tens of thousands, spread across an enormous geographic range. Small, isolated communities with limited genetic diversity. Into this already stressed population came modern humans, carrying diseases the Neanderthals had no immunity to, competing for the same prey animals, and possibly in some cases directly displacing Neanderthal communities from their territories. But also interbreeding, absorption. A small population in contact with a larger one over thousands of years tends not to be replaced cleanly. It is gradually absorbed, individuals moving between groups, children raised in mixed communities, genetic material flowing in both directions until the smaller population no longer exists as a distinct entity. The Neanderthals may not have gone extinct so much as they were incorporated. Their genes survived in us. Their fire-making knowledge may have survived in us. Their tools, their techniques, their understanding of the European landscape, passed down through contact and shared communities, may have survived in us. We did not replace them. We became them, in part, and they became us. Which brings us to the last part of this story, not about ancient bones or genetic percentages, but about what it means to have been so wrong about another kind of person for so long, and what that wrongness cost us. The story of how we understood Neanderthals is, in many ways, the story of how science works at its worst and at its best. At its worst, a partial skeleton in 1856, combined with the cultural assumptions of the time, produced an image that was wrong in almost every significant detail. And that image persisted for over a century, resistant to evidence, because it confirmed something people wanted to believe: that modern humans were uniquely intelligent, uniquely cultural, uniquely capable of the things that make us human. At its best, generation after generation of researchers kept digging, kept analysing, kept asking whether the received wisdom actually fit the evidence, and kept finding that it didn't. The hearth at Barnum took 4 years to fully analyse. 4 years of careful work to distinguish a campfire from a lightning strike, to confirm that the pyrite was brought from somewhere else, to establish that the temperatures were too high and too localised for any natural explanation. 4 years to add 350,000 years to the history of human technology. What the 2025 Neanderthal research collectively tells us is something that should change how we think about human uniqueness. The things we consider most essentially human — fire, art, music, burial of the dead, care for the injured and elderly, symbolic thinking, language — were not invented by Homo sapiens. They emerged earlier, in other species. In beings we spent a century dismissing as barely more than animals. The capacity for these things appears to be older and more widespread in the human family than we wanted to admit. It may be that what we call civilization is not the achievement of one particular species, but the accumulated result of many species over millions of years, each contributing something that was eventually inherited by the survivors. 40,000 years ago, the last Neanderthals died. We don't know where. We don't know how. We don't know if there was a final individual, the last member of a species that had made fire, made music, made art, and made children with our ancestors, who died alone or surrounded by family. We know they were here. We know they were capable of more than we gave them credit for. And we know that somewhere in the people watching this video right now, in the DNA, in the ancient inherited gene variants that shape immune response and pain sensitivity and dozens of other traits we haven't fully mapped yet, something of them survives. Not as a separate species, not as a memory, as us. The fire they made 400,000 years ago in Suffolk is still burning. It just took us a very long time to see it.